The last time I heard from my son was a week before we lost him. We lost him 29 April 2007. And he was a member of 1st Recon Battalion. They were in Fallujah, his first tour, and they were looking for Marines that had experience in the Fallujah area to be part of what they called a MIT team, Military Transition Team. It was the time when we had the surge going on, and they wanted Marines to embed with the Iraqis. And my son Travis was one of the Marines from 1st Recon Battalion that was selected to go, one of the officers, one of about 10 guys, really, that live with the Iraqis. And, you know, we knew it was a tough mission. He left the day after Christmas, 2006. And, you know, we got the calls, and I could just tell early on we got the calls that, you know, they were going through some tough things over there. But the last time I talked to him, you know, it was a different message. There was a different tone in his voice. And, you know, when he called me, the one thing he kept saying over and over again to me was, "Dad, hey, we're fighting in the streets every day over there, over here." And I don't think the rest of the country knows that. I don't think they see what these brave Americans are doing, these brave Marines are doing in the streets of Fallujah. And it was unusual. It was an unusual call because for the first time ever, you know, you always look forward to those calls on the weekends on the satellite. And the first time ever, he kept getting cut off. And he kept calling back. He probably called me back 4 times. And every time he called me back, he kept saying the same thing. You know, "Dad, you know, they really can't have any appreciation for it." And the reason he knew that, Camp Fallujah was nearby. And nowadays they have cable. And these guys get a chance to go back and watch the cable TV, and they see what we're watching back here. And he's with his Marines in the street, and he's looking on cable, and he's just like, this not even being mentioned. I mean, they have no idea what we're sacrificing over here for our country. So, you know, that next week, we got the knock on the door. And, you know, first thing I did after, you know, total shock and disbelief is called my wife and my daughter together, and I said, you know, this is what Travis kept telling me. This is the message he was sharing with me. And so at that point as a family, we pledged that we were going to let people know. So when the newspapers called, and they did, because it was that period of time when the news wanted to hear about the next guy that went down. And when the TV channels called and they said, "Do you want to talk?" We said, "Yeah, we're going to talk." And really, as a family, we've been talking ever since. And part of what we're doing is one of the ways we're talking, you know, I decided I was going to write this book. My wife started a foundation to work, as Chris said, with our veterans and the families of the fallen and that next generation. She thought that was so important, and we're following through on that. But you don't know. I mean, you know, I think the most natural thing when you're grieving is to pull down the shades, lock the doors, and tell everyone to go away. And that's probably maybe where we would have been if it wasn't for what I heard from my son that week before we lost him. You know, one of the things we always had as a family was my son's friends. And there was no better friend than his Naval Academy roommate, Navy SEAL Brendan Looney. And, you know, Brendan would, anytime he was home before he deployed, he'd come to our home and always check in with us. When he got done SEAL training, actually, he called up and said, you know, he was coming up. Most of the time we had folks visiting the home, but nobody would ever come by themselves. They'd come with friends, and, you know, type of person Brendan was. He came up and spent the night with my wife and I and just talked the whole night about Travis and his friendship and how much they meant to each other. And so you know, I came back in the spring of 2010, started to pull things together, and then we got a call. 21 September 2010, we got a call from Brendan's mom, and it was another blow. We lost Brendan in the hills of Afghanistan. It was like losing another son. And so Marine Looney, first person she called was my wife, and we headed down to Maryland just to be there. I mean, there's not much you can do just to be there to support, and we were there to support Maureen and Kevin and the rest of the family. And at that point, I started to think about that story, the story of Travis and the Iraqis. I realized, it's a bigger story. It's a bigger story about all that served. It's Travis and Brendan, it's Afghanistan, it's Iraq. It's all the sacrifice that these young men and women are doing and the incredible effort they're putting forward for our country. So I started to think about maybe the bigger story. And then if you fast forward from September to that following spring, the Navy SEALs, they located and killed Osama bin Laden. And then 2 weeks later, the president shared the story of Travis and Brendan on his Memorial Day speech and talked about them as an example. And I think at that point, I thought for certain that, yeah, this is the story that I want to tell. I want to tell the story of these guys, their friendship, what it meant to each of them, their service, their sacrifice, and in a way, hopefully tell the story for all the brave men and women that are serving today, and do whatever we could to make sure that the rest of America does know from that original message that I got from Travis. And when we've got 1% serving and the other 99%, off at the mall, and so much happening now with the selfie world and everything else going on, more stories have to be told like this. It was great to see what happened with American Sniper and the popularity there. And so this is just another story of two guys that put it on the line, but they'd be the first to say it's not about them, it's about everyone else that's serving. After SEAL training, I talked about the visits. Brendan, one of the first place he came is to see my wife and I, and spent that night with us at our home. And then shortly after that, he was married, and he called my wife over and gave her his Navy SEAL Trident and said, "This is for you." He said, "I wouldn't have gotten this without Travis there with me all the way." And he did that on the wedding night. And they couldn't have been more gracious. Brendan tried to have me fill in for Travis wherever he could. And, they were always, Amy and Brendan were always looking out for us, making sure that we were doing okay. And we went up to talk to him. We said, "Well, what's going on, guys? Where's the honeymoon?" And that's when Brendan shared with us, "Well, I'm deploying to Iraq in a couple of days." And again, it's the message for the rest of the country, what these families go through, what these men and women go through. And here he is, a couple of days after his wedding, and he's on a deployment. I lost my wife, Janet, 3 years ago now, 5 years almost to the day after my son. She came down with cancer, probably related to the stress from losing the son. But those 5 years that she had, she put everything into making sure that we were there to do what we needed to do to help. And it gets back to that last phone call again, what my son said and what we decided to do at that point as a family. And so this book is about that story. The foundation is about that story when it's all said and done. But the movement continues. We talk about being part of the If Not Me Then Who movement, and we're out around the country, and it's getting more and more legs. So we're excited about that. My daughter runs that today. She runs the foundation. She stepped forward after lost my wife. What I thought I would do is share. The foundation is doing incredible work. So Amy Looney, I share with you about Amy. Well, Amy heads up what we call our survivor services. She works with families of the fallen. And we talk about If Not Me Then Who. We talk about, that grieving time, and we know what that's about. But there's only so much time that you can, sit down and grieve. And then you gotta start picking it up and moving. And we say, if you really want to honor the fallen, then you challenge the living. And so we work with some of the families, and we go off on expeditions, and we help other people. And it's a great healing process for what the families are going through. We started out with a run in our hometown around 9/11. We said, you know, part of that awareness, you know, making sure the community understood who was serving them. And we said, what a better time, you know, 9/11, appreciate the service and sacrifice of the veterans and all of our first responders. And my brother came forward. My son had actually visited Rescue Team 1 in New York before he left for his second tour. He came back and they had given him a hat, and on the back it said 9/11, never forget. He said, Dad, wear this when I'm gone. Know that this is what we're doing. And, you know, so that story I'd share with my brother, and he said, you know, let's do something on 9/11. Let's do a 9/11 Heroes Run. And we started that 5K, and, you know, we got ready to do the run, and we had 500 people come out to our hometown. And now we have over 50 runs across the country. Last year in our hometown, there was 3,500 runners. In Houston, it's the 9/11 event for them in the city of Houston. And they had 1,000 down in San Diego and 1,000 in Phoenix and in all different places. And that's sort of the way we're approaching this, one community at a time, working with the communities, grassroots, really getting in and working with the students, working with that next level that's going to be stepping forward to serve, and you know, try to get that message out. Back to that initial conversation with my son about, you know, the rest of the country really doesn't know. And so we're one of, you know, probably others that are out there, but we're on a mission, and we've been on it for 8 years, and we're not stopping.